Welcome to The Real Tea. I'm your host, Tammy Murphy, broker owner of RH2L, bringing Miami Valley real homes to love.
And I'm Ellie Sollenberger to give my perspective as a home buyer.
We're going to give you the key to Miami Valley real estate.
We're back.
All the time. We're here. We're back. And good to see you again.
Yes.
So we've got lots of things that we can talk about. But today I thought maybe we would go over like the 7 most common struggles that people have during real estate. And you can kind of give what your experience was during the process and if you thought that it was a struggle for you or if you really handled it well, which we already know you handled it well. She's a pro at this and we're a pro at all this stuff. So,
but maybe I wasn't a pro the very first time.
Yeah, that's true. So effectively during the market that we're in now, which we're talking about 2024, hot sellers market, low inventory and all of that, I think that's the number one struggle that people are having currently is dealing with finding a home, finding the one that's worth getting into, looking for, and just getting in for a tour, let alone making an offer on. So I think that's the number one thing. And I group that all together, like even getting into a contract, because that process itself, as you know, we
Very
saw.
frustrating.
How many homes did we look at?
So backing up a little bit, going to just looking at homes, I feel like buyers, potential buyers, need to look at every kind of home that's in their price range because they might not know what they like and don't like. I equate it to when you're a bride-to-be and you go try on wedding dresses and they're like, try everything on because the dress might not be what you had on your pictures board coming in.
The one that you thought that it was going to be, what you visioned in your head.
Yeah.
Right.
And there's some houses that might have the potential to be a lot better once you take possession and you change it to what you want it.
And again, I go back to that adage that there is just this overwhelming feeling that people have when they walk into that home, that they feel it, no explanation, like you don't really realize it until it's just like, oh, and then you start placing furniture and people and, you know, naming the bedrooms and things like that. It's just amazing how many times that actually comes to be the actual fruition that people then realize, oh, that's my house. That's the one I want.
And I feel like once it's meant to be, it will be easy too. Like back to my story, we put in 4 bids and that one was accepted within 10 minutes of putting it in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where the other ones were frustrating to say the least.
And you feel like it's more of a push it to make it happen, or you're having to wait and it just feels like it's not natural.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, what's the next?
So the next area really that becomes a struggle is with financing. And we're talking about times where interest rates are higher than what they had been and prices are higher than what they had been. So people need more money for the cost of it. And I think financing is the biggest struggle that a lot of people have to face or overcome, kind of figure out, what do I really want to deal with? Again, to your point, maybe having that basis of a budget in mind, being pre-approved. We've talked about that. But I think really knowing all of the costs that are involved with the home ownership as well and understanding if that's right for you.
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest things is having a good relationship with your mortgage lender and maybe shopping around a little bit. Don't go with your friend's best friend's cousin's uncle who just got his license and you want to be like his first one because you're nice. Go with somebody who actually knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
And has a background in different types of loans and can guide you to maybe FHA is your best bet, or maybe conventional is your best bet, or if you're military, you can use a VA loan or USDA, but those are only in certain areas. So,
right.
You know, they don't go with somebody who is going to steer you into the wrong loan to start with.
Right. And sometimes, especially with new buyers, you really don't understand what the differences are with each of those different types of loan programs. So while I, as the realtor, can certainly answer some of those questions, it's very specific to lenders and what their portfolio, what their services allow for them to do. And that's really information that you need to have good communication with them to say, what does this mean? And am I better to put more money down so that I don't maybe have PMI, or am I better to keep that money in my reserve and then pay it down as an extra principal payment as I want to throughout the time? There's a lot of little nuances that come into play that people really can knock 7 years off of their mortgage, but not be tied into a higher monthly mortgage payment amount.
Yeah, and I think we talked about it a little bit on a different podcast, but knowing what your insurance is ahead of time,
Yeah.
and making sure that you can afford that too, and that piece, and like moving costs, and just all of the different
All of the things.
costs that are associated with, don't drain your whole savings account,
Yeah.
and then you're calling up all of your friends you've ever known since kindergarten and trying to bribe them with pizza and beer so that you can move.
Because there's moving costs that's involved. Like
Yeah,
you've got to rent
exactly.
the U-Haul usually, and all the boxes and the tape and
Yeah.
all the stuff. It's a lot.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. So the next area really is, I call that a process area, and it really is 3 struggles that people encounter. So during the process, you have the inspection, you have the appraisal, and then you have title. And so at any of those stages within the contract is the potential to be an issue or a struggle for somebody. So again, if this is new experience for you, this is all new language and you're not really sure, well, what does that mean? But as we found, in trying to get into the contract, do we have to waive our rights to an inspection? Do we have to give up our right to get an appraisal or give an appraisal gap? And these are things that, as the buyer, it's your right to do. You certainly want to have the full peace of mind with things. So I don't want to shortchange. If there's a struggle during the inspection process, the seller's not willing to make any repairs, or there's too much that needs to be brought up to speed, up to your level of satisfaction in order to pursue, you want to know that sooner in the process rather than later. And really, those things come down to a timeline that's dictated within the contract when we write that you have so many days to do your inspection. That's your due diligence period. And if you're really concerned about the stain in the wall of the ceiling on the first floor, and it doesn't make sense that it's coming from a bathroom that's above but not right above it, then that's really an issue that you want the inspector to be able to dive into and find out, is there still a high moisture reading? Is this higher, is there something else that's going on? Because there's a level between getting to the roof, so it's obviously not a roof issue, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like a lot of buyers are being made to feel like, don't do the inspection, just waive it and get into the contract. But that takes a different level of experience in the market to say, am I comfortable feeling like I might have to do this repair or have this repair work done? And then is that additional cost I need to factor in?
I think you have to weigh, do you want the house and you will give up A, B, and C to get into the house? Or do you want to make a more financially sound investment?
Right. And so the difference is maybe there's a threshold amount that if it's less than $5,000 to repair, I can probably handle that over a period of time. If it's more urgent and it needs to be done before I can even move in, that's a different story.
So I've seen contracts where it says that a inspection will be done for informational purposes only. Can you explain how that's different than just a normal inspection?
So it's really just telling the seller that I'm pretty confident in the conditions that I see, that I don't really have any major red flags. So I'm just going to do this so I have peace of mind and not have any surprise, oh, you really do need foundation work done on this home. So that is giving some ease of assurance that you're still going to do the inspection process, but you're not going to hit the seller up for a list of nickel and dime items that they need to repair.
So are you able to get out of the contract if there's too much, if you do one for informational purposes only?
So it depends on the language that you write in there. If you only write that it's for informational purposes only, then you may not have the inspection as a potential out. Okay. But and a lot of investors will use language that so long as it's up to a dollar amount, right? If it's above $20,000, well, then I want to be able to walk away from the deal. But less than that, I can probably handle it, and I factored it into my numbers. A typical home buyer, I'm going to say typical home buyer is usually 5 to 10,000 is their threshold. Just because anything more than that, that's a little bit, I'd make a different offer price on the home if I knew that I needed to put $20,000 out right away within my first couple of weeks of being in the home.
So if you do one for informational purposes only, can you change the offer amount once you get that back?
So that's, again, if you've kind of you've kind of insinuated that I'm okay, this is just informational, not really going to come back to the seller. So hard to come back and say we're going to negotiate at that point. So this is why, if you're at least saying, hey, I'm going to do it, it's mostly just for my information, and so long as there isn't anything major structurally wrong with the property or less than $10,000 in repairs to correct, I'll still move forward with it. So you can write that language in there. Then at least you've set the stage. Now, if the inspector comes back and says, yeah, there's a major foundational issue here, we need to get a structural engineer out, well, that's probably $1,500 to $2,500, right? And that's just them doing an additional inspection at that point. If they come back and they say it's $25,000 to put a new footer in here, most buyers aren't going to be willing to do that, nor are sellers going to be willing to do that in order to make it right. So that would be something that you would want to maybe negotiate on the price. How are we going to handle it? We still want to move forward, but we need to readdress what we were talking about on the purchase price.
Have you ever seen a house that something came back so bad that they just took it off the market?
Yes.
What was it?
So anytime foundational issues come out as an issue in the inspection, you're typically talking about tens of thousands of dollars that people are not comfortable with. And there's also, is there a guarantee that structural soundness is there? Even if I do this correction, does it mean that I don't have further problems that I have to address? Depends on why the foundational issues happened. Did it happen because of soil erosion, and is there still erosion that's going on? Did it happen because, new construction site just across the way happened, and so now all of a sudden the drainage of the water lines, everything is affected because of that? Just really depends on what the situation is. But normally, foundational issues are the number one deal killer with most people. It's just most people don't want to deal with it.
Yeah. So did that house end up selling ever?
Well, let's say that there's been some matters of litigation that take place usually, depending on where it was in the process. And that's where, buyer beware, the caveat emptor is a saying, but, the due diligence period is the buyers need to do an inspection. And it may sound like it's easy to waive that and just do it for informational purposes, but that's really your number one way, and that is never 100% fail-safe either, by the way. Inspectors miss things. They may not notice or see something, or it may not be apparent at the time of the inspection. So there are defects that can happen after the fact when you move into it, and you'll see those lawsuits that come out where a home inspector gets sued because, well, it didn't happen. Well, there weren't 18 people living in the house when I checked it, so there was no way to know that this much water usage was going to create a problem. There's always more to the story, which is really the reason why we want to make sure that buyers understand when you're buying a home, it's your right to be able to do a home inspection. We want to encourage you to do that. It's so easy to think in tight inventory, seller's market, competing offers, well, I'll just waive that right. But you need to know what you're signing up for if you do that. Like, your level of, I can fix that, or I know somebody that can fix that, goes a long way if suddenly there's issues that have to be addressed.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So then the appraisals is the next part of that process, which, We haven't seen a lot of short appraisals simply because the market has continued to trend upwards and the prices are value there. But a short appraisal can be a deal breaker if the buyer doesn't have the resource to cover out of pocket what the loan isn't going to do, because the loan is only going to go up to the appraised value amount. So if the buyer is having to cover those costs, again, going back to the financing, do they have enough reserves in order to cover if there is a short appraisal? And do they really want it? Or do you want to come back to the table and negotiate with the seller that, hey, the appraisal came in, it's $10,000 short, can we just go to a new offer price and address it from there?
So in 2024, today's market, are you seeing a lot of appraisal gaps included in offers?
We're still seeing in competing offers where people will do the appraisal gap. They'll waive the inspection. They'll try to give the appraisal gap guarantee that they'll cover. Again, usually they're stipulating if it's a $10,000 difference, I can cover that. But a lot of people don't go much over that. I mean, $10,000 additional out of pocket is a considerable amount for most people.
Yeah. What price range of homes do you usually see that in?
I'm going to say it's in your 200 to 300 on that price range. That it's still a very tight inventory because that's a greater number. The majority of people are looking for those types of price homes. Once you get above that, I mean, it's a different set of rules because you're talking about probably people who've already gotten equity out of homes and the value increase. They probably already have reserves that they're not really worried about. So a lot of these situations, and the concern is for a first-time buyer or somebody who hasn't bought a home in 20 plus years. The market is totally different from the last time that they bought it. And oh, wait a minute, you used to pull out a book to see where the MLS properties were, right? And
Yeah.
what do you mean you can send me something to sign electronically on my phone? What?
Yeah.
It's totally different. No, it's a different market. So.
Okay.
And then that last part of the process is with title issues. And I know we had John McManus in here, and he was talking a little bit about, making sure that you're doing that due diligence of the process itself with real estate, because that makes sure that you're not inheriting delinquent property taxes. It makes sure that things are brought up current. Even utilities can be a sticking point for some people, or HOA documents and things like that. So
when you part of the contract, you pick title insurance or not. Is that something that is put into the loan or is out of pocket for closing costs?
So it is factored in on the buyer's closing cost estimates and funds that they need to bring to the table. If the seller is contributing a portion or some or none, then obviously that will be a credit or a debit that's added onto there. But it's typically seen on the buyer's side of their settlement statement that these funds were collected so that this benefit is given there.
Okay.
Okay, and we didn't really have to deal with. Yeah, we did. What am I talking about? We had last minute changes, right?
Yes.
We had I'm going to call this really what's the number one issue that happens with real estate transactions is the oh shit moment. The oops, this happened because something suddenly just changed. And now you have to take a step back, first of all, breathe, and realize, okay, what can I do to correct this or fix this or overcome it? And this happens with people when maybe there's a sudden loss of a job or there's a transition that otherwise wasn't expected in the process.
Or you see all the time where people go out and buy a new car or they go furnish their house on credit before they go in to the closing table.
Yes. And that, I'm telling you, is probably the biggest thing that happens is that people just get so excited and, oh, I've got 15 rooms in my house. I need to get furniture for all of it. And there's a great sale and I don't even have to make my first payment for 3 months, 6 months, whatever that line of promotion is, right? And they sign up for it and they don't even realize that this impacts your ability to be able to close on the home because the lender is going to do a final pull of your credit. They're going to ask for a final look over of the documentation, and they do an income verification. So your employment is verified. And if any of those things have changed, It's very difficult to overcome that as a result of, hey, we're closing on Friday. Surprise, Thursday you found out I don't have a job anymore.
Yeah.
It's just not the thing to deal with.
And I feel like with today's economy right now, I'm seeing more and more, especially in my mom's groups, like I lost my job this morning, I was laid off, my husband was laid off, something like that. So that I feel like is becoming more prevalent because we have just gone through like the Great Resignation, that they call it, where it was kind of employees
making the decision that they didn't want to be in that office anymore, or they didn't want to work in that. They found a different thing that they wanted to do. And that's all fine and good. I'm not saying that you can't make those life decisions or have life changes that happen, but immediately you should be reaching out to your realtor that's involved and absolutely reaching out to the lender so that you can have those conversations to say, what do we need to do? And it could be that you need to buy yourself another week or do something, because if you get a job that's in the same field, right, it's the same, but it's a different company, potentially it doesn't even come up on the screen at that point because you're still employed, you have income, and it's not an issue. So don't give up on it. Don't think you just got to throw the baby out with the bathwater. You may actually still be able to salvage something and not lose the deal, but communication is absolutely key.
Mm-hmm.
And last thing, and we saw a lot of this, we're still seeing a lot of this, is with occupancy. And it can be a challenge because as the buyer, you're coming in and you want to be able to get into the house, the new house, make some repairs, paint the walls, do whatever, put that furniture in there. But the seller is needing a delayed occupancy.
Yeah.
They want that extra time. So now, are you continuing the lease that you're in? Are you going to live with family, staying in a hotel? Occupancy can be a big thing.
We saw a lot of that, whether it was grandma and grandpa were moving to a nursing home and they had a move-in date, of a couple months from now, so they needed occupancy in their home until then. Or people were moving out of the state, out of the area. Or people weren't able to get in their home, their new home, until a certain date, so they needed to stay in their home. So it's kind of a chain reaction at that point.
Absolutely. And not that long ago, when we would have a delay in occupancy come up, there was a different addendum that would get signed up, and that would say, I want to rent back my home for the 2 weeks that I need it, or for the month, right? Doesn't happen. Like it's a natural. They're putting it into the listing saying, hey, I need occupancy until here. If you want to buy my home, then you're going to let me have that.
Yeah.
But you are effectively, as the buyer, as of the closing date, responsible for the home and paying a mortgage on it.
And if you go from owner to renter, you need renter's insurance for your stuff.
Yes. There's that insurance again.
Yep.
So just a lot of little things, and I know we went through that kind of quickly, but so the 7 most common struggles that happen in real estate is with inventory, finding the right one, getting it under contract, your financing, your process of that, whether it's the inspection or the appraisal or title issues, and then any last minute changes, that's going to be a challenge to overcome, and then occupancy. And hopefully that helps save you a little bit of time, effort, and struggle, but feel free to share your messages with us below. We'll look over the information, and then if there's anything for us to address, we'll come back with another episode.
So based on that, what is your tip as the real estate professional?
Come informed with what all is involved. Like, don't take it blindly to think that this is not HGTV. Don't think you're going to see 3 houses and the decision is made. There is never a thing as a perfect house. There's always something wrong with everything. And just know what you're comfortable with. So I think if you've got a good head around all of that, if you understand that, then you'll be good.
Great advice.
All right, thanks.
All right, thanks.
Thanks for joining us today on the Realty Podcast. If you enjoyed the knowledge and entertainment today, please subscribe and share with your friends. We will be embarking on a journey that bridges the gap between realtors and clients, uncovering the heart and tea of real estate.